Character design is one of the most important aspects of success in anime. In fact, it's so important that the Anime Awards every single year hand out an award for best character design. And while the same thing is obviously true of traditional Western media, who can all receive awards for best makeup, outfits, character design, and so much more, really the universal truth is, when it boils down to it, if you're watching something, you want the people you're watching to look somewhat interesting. So obviously there's scenarios that the characters can't be over the top interesting looking, like in cop TV shows or anything along those lines. In the world of anime, the imagination is really the only limit to what a character can look like. And Boruto's character design, while somewhat lacking in part 1, has taken a massive step forward in Two Blue Vortex. Whether it's Mitsuki's flowing majestic robes, Sarada's black and red coat, and her knee-high kinda heel boots, or even Boruto's multiple belts, every character in Two Blue Vortex not only looks better, but also their outfits better match the sentiments of their future character developments. Boruto, now in Two Blue Vortex, looks the part of a rogue shinobi, who's supposed to evoke a similar feeling as to when we saw Itachi in Naruto. Mitsuki's flowing robes display power and dominance to help us understand that he's gotten so much stronger, not only as a ninja, but as a sage. And Himawari's clothing has now been switched to don a symbol that she's been tied to since the beginning of Boruto, which is the sunflower. Himawari's clothing, now having a sunflower on her shirt and her choker, is meant to lay it on us rather thick as the reader of what her future story might have laying in wait. But why is the symbology of the sunflower so inextricably tied to Himawari? And what does her being tied to this relatively simple flower mean for her story? Could this connection give us a possible hint about what her future abilities might be? Display to us on what side of the future power struggles she'll fall on? Or even go so far as to explain to us what possible dormant abilities lay within Himawari that Juro was able to identify? Well, I actually believe if you dive deep into the connection between Himawari and sunflowers, you can find the answers to all three of those questions. And in order to figure out why that symbology is so important, all we have to do is understand the story of the sunflower. Because when you dive deep into anything written by Masashi Kishimoto, you'll realize that the names he chooses for his characters are incredibly intentional, and more often than not, hints about what that character is going to do lie in the most obvious place possible: their name. Naruto Uzumaki is a fish cake roll with a spiral in the middle that's cut thin and added into ramen. Before the first chapter of Naruto was even released, Naruto, loving ramen, was preordained. But the Uzumaki in his name also referred to the Fuinjutsu that would later be tied to the Uzumaki, and the spiral nature of the Rasengan that would be his iconic move. Jiraiya is quite literally named after a mountain sage who uses toad magic and can summon toads to battle against a man by the name of Orochimaru who uses snake magic and can summon giant snakes. Names and symbology are incredibly important in Naruto, and understanding them and the history that comes along with them helps us make guesses for what the future of Naruto and Boruto might hold. Which is why today we're talking Himawari's true intentions revealed. But before we get to revealing anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you love the idea of me doing deep dives on your favorite anime and manga, you're gonna love my other channel, The Weeb Commander, where instead of talking about Naruto and Boruto, I talk all other anime. And if you like the idea of me talking about all anime period, you're gonna love my anime podcast, Otaku's Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And if you just wanna look like you keep up with all things anime and manga, go ahead and meander on over into my merch store, otakusanonymous.net, where you can pick up some of the greatest anime t-shirts, sweatshirts, and sticker packs known to man. Before we get into all that, today we gotta talk about our favorite recurring sponsor to the page, Raycon. See, this Mother's Day, Raycon wants to give you an opportunity to help your mom finally tune out the sound of you screaming at video games. And the freedom from the ruckus of your mother's everyday house life lies with Raycon earbuds. See, the Raycon everyday earbuds are the perfect way to tune out the chaos of the world and tune in to something you love. And their audio quality rivals all the big audio brands you know and love at a price you'll love much more than theirs. But let's say you don't want to take out your earbuds to tap back into the world. The Raycon earbuds also offer an awareness mode and have optimized gel tips for a custom, comfortable fit, making these earbuds, in my opinion, the perfect companion for either a trip to the gym or a run. With other earbuds, I'm in a constant state of worry that my shaking around or my sweat is going to make them fall out somewhere gross. And the last thing that I want to do while in the middle of an Otaku's Anonymous podcast is clean off one of my earbuds that just hit a gym floor. So trust me when I say, Seriously, the Raycon Everyday Earbuds make the perfect Mother's Day gift. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in my description or go to buyraycon.com/nchammer23 to get 20% off your Raycon purchase, plus free shipping. It's time you became your mother's favorite child. So, before we can really dive deep into why the sunflower is such an important symbol for Himawari moving forward in Two Blue Vortex, it's important you understand the most famous stories revolving around the sunflower and the sunflower's meaning in Japanese society that Kishimoto is most definitely tapping into to inform Himawari's future. See, sunflowers aren't actually native to Japan. In fact, they're not even native to Europe, who are the first continent outside of Asia to interface with Japan in any meaningful capacity, as Japan rather famously didn't open its borders to the outside world until the 1860s, during the Meiji Reformation period. But this doesn't necessarily mean that Japan wasn't interfacing with the outside world at all. Most notably, the Dutch had a somewhat open trading route with Japan prior to the Meiji Reformation period, and it was through said Dutch connection that a lot of outside influence began slowly but surely seeping its way into Japan. But like I said, sunflowers aren't even native to Europe, let alone the Netherlands. In fact, sunflowers are only native to the Americas, mostly Central America, but also some parts of South and North America. And sunflowers in the Americas have been used as a food source by Native Americans for over 4,000 years. In fact, there's evidence that sunflower seeds were used as a source of fat by Native Americans before corn. And if you learned anything about US history, you'll know that corn was a massive staple of Native American diets, as things like masa, which is essentially a flour replacement created through ground cornmeal, has been used to make breads, tortillas, biscuits, basically anything of a bread-like substance. And thus, because sunflowers are only native to the Americas, they were introduced to Europe and therefore by extension Japan until the colonialization of the Americas, which would have started in its most full-on sense with Hernando Cortez discovering Southern America. At which point, after killing everybody who had been there for thousands of years, they decided, oh, pretty flowers, and brought some back to Europe. And thus, really, when it boils down to it, sunflowers weren't introduced to Japan until the 1700s, at which point in Japan they became known as Himawari. Yes, that's right, the word Himawari in Japanese just means sunflower. And when these Himawari were introduced to Japan in the 1700s, they became massively popular. And still to this day, the sunflower is one of the most prevalently loved flowers in all of Japan. And that love extends all the way to Japanese media like anime. As outside of Boruto, obviously, almost the entirety of Samurai Champloo revolves around sunflowers, with one of the main characters of the story, Fu, looking for a samurai who smells of sunflowers, who ends up being Saizo Kazumi. But the sunflower being introduced to humanity outside of the Americas relatively late in history doesn't stop people from thinking that the sunflower has been a part of cultural storytelling for thousands of years. Because while that might be true for Native Americans, there's no feasible way that non-Native Americans would even know what sunflowers were. And yet, the most famous story about sunflowers, undoubtedly the story that Kishimoto was tapping into by tying Himawari to Himawari, is the story of Clytie and Apollo, a story written in 45 BC by a famous Roman poet, Ovid. See, this story is mostly about Clytie, a water nymph, and the story is a relatively simple one. Clytie is in love with Apollo, the god of the sun, but as Clytie was a water nymph and therefore stuck to the lower realm of Earth, she was as far as you could be away from Apollo. And thus, in order for Clytie to assuage the ache of love she felt for Apollo, she would sit in the water all day and watch Apollo as he crossed the sky. And thus, every day, all day, Clytie's face would follow Apollo as he made his journey across the sky. Thus, it's said when Clytie died, she became the first sunflower. Now, this is how the most famous story of the sunflower is known the world over. And it is undoubtedly the reason that Himawari is named Himawari. Because if there's one thing I'm trying to teach you on this page, it's 1, history, 2, science, and 3, Kishimoto usually gets his stories from mythology. That wasn't one thing. The 4th thing isn't math. Now, technically, that story is inaccurate, because if you're a wild nerd like myself, you'll know that sunflowers weren't in ancient Rome. And therefore, Clytie doesn't actually become a sunflower. In actuality, Ovid was actually probably writing about Clytie turning into a European heliotrope, which is also a flower that follows the sun. It's just not as big and exuberant as a sunflower. So if anybody ever brings up the story of Clytie and Apollo, they're probably talking about a sunflower, not the European heliotrope. But that's not important to what we're talking about today, but it is a fun piece of trivia for you to bring up. What is important, though, is that this story has forever tied the concepts of adoration, longevity, and above all, loyalty to the sun, to the sunflower, forever. And to obviously Himawari, who's named after sunflowers, has always been tied to sunflowers. There has been a myriad of other points throughout Boruto's story where Kishimoto has really bonked us over the head that her name is Himawari. Greatest examples of which would be things like the vase that she makes that eventually Kawaki breaks. This vase, well, obviously a vase for flowers, is also covered in sunflowers. And the symbology of Kawaki breaking this vase should not be lost on any of you. We just established the fact that Himawari, or sunflowers, are known for their loyalty to the sun, their adoration of the sun, and for the longevity that they're said to confer. By Kawaki breaking a vase covered in sunflowers that was created by the girl named Sunflower. Looking back at it now, this is one of Kishimoto's most subtle hints that at one point Kawaki would be responsible for the destruction of the loyalty to the sun. The sun in Boruto's obvious case being Boruto. However, what's interesting, symbolically, is that it's the love of the Uzumaki family, specifically Naruto and Boruto, that gets Kawaki to repair this vase, and thus repair the sunflowers, which is an important point for later. On top of this is also an anime canon episode where Inujin is realizing that his Super Beast scroll isn't working anymore, and so he has to go to Himawari to try and relearn love of painting, and Himawari is painting sunflowers. But now the symbology of Himawari being tied to a sunflower is as obvious as it's ever been in Two Blue Vortex, as a girl, quite literally named Sunflower, is now decked out in sunflower clothing. So what is Kishimoto trying to tell us? And more specifically, what does this mean for Himawari? Well, we've actually already begun to see the answer materialize. See, because as soon as we saw Himawari make this aesthetic change, that is chapter 1 of Two Blue Vortex, there was also a simultaneous massive change that just occurred that she wasn't necessarily changed by. See, if sunflowers follow the sun and are meant to symbolize loyalty, Himawari displayed in chapter 1 of Two Blue Vortex that she, quite possibly more than anybody else on Earth, is fiercely loyal to the sun, because Himawari, with no evidence whatsoever, still doesn't believe that Boruto is a bad person. In fact, in a conversation that she was having with Team 10 in Chapter 1, she said that not only would she like to help him, but also that she doesn't remember Boruto to be as bad as everybody around her says. She even goes so far as to say that she doesn't believe Boruto kills her father like Shikadai says he did. But we can tell that Himawari isn't as resistant to omnipotence as Sarada or Sumire, who straight up appear to simply just know what happened. And while this could just be a matter of the fact that Himawari is younger than Sarada and Sumire and has spent the majority of her time with Team 10, it appears as though Himawari was affected by omnipotence. However, the loyalty she has to the sun, as the sunflower, keeps her from fully believing the massive global scale genjutsu. Now, as for a practical breakdown on why Himawari might be slightly resistant to the powers of omnipotence, I can't necessarily say, as it could be because she loves Boruto, or it could be because she has 6 paths, or Tsutsuki chakra, or it really could just be because she has loyalty to her son, which is Boruto. But regardless of reasoning, Himawari being tied to sunflowers and Boruto being tied to the sun signals to me, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that in the upcoming chapters, presumably after Himawari is kidnapped by Jura, maybe, that Himawari and Boruto will finally find themselves fighting on the same side of a struggle. And Himawari will realize, possibly after having a conversation with Boruto, that she's always been on his side. And thus, I think there is a grand total 0% chance that Himawari and Boruto ever come to blows. And I believe that the next couple of chapters will have Himawari taking a massive step up in terms of character and plot development so that Himawari and Boruto can actually coexist as protagonists. And thus Himawari, the sunflower, can truly finally become the flower who follows the sun. Tell me that alone as a tagline isn't hard enough to make this a possibility. But I think there's actually more to Himawari's sunflower symbology than just loyalty to Boruto. Because one, the whole astral bodies lead to loyalty to Boruto thing is kind of already being done with Mitsuki, and two, because there's more than one sun. Also, small revelation that might be its own video, the moon doesn't need the sun. It technically needs the earth, and it doesn't even really need the earth. It just guides our tides and protects us from asteroids. And so while people often talk about the moon and the sun being counterparts that need each other, they don't. And I believe that's actually why Mitsuki's having his character development arc currently, as Mitsuki is the moon, but he's identified Boruto as the sun. And while most media would have us believe that these are yin and yang, what Mitsuki is realizing is that as the moon, he's not dependent on anybody. The moon doesn't follow the sun. The sunflower does. And thus Mitsuki realizing that he doesn't need the sun and realizing that he should do what he wants is actually in line with his symbology tying him to the moon. And thus, if you're actually gonna use the Boruto is the sun and therefore blank should have loyalty to him, it applies better to Himawari than Mitsuki. And what's incredible about Himawari being the flower that follows the sun is that not only is her brother constantly being tied to the sun, but so is her father. Because while Boruto is this generation's son, as in the big fireball, her father was the previous generation's son. And before some of you are like,
Oh my god, and Boruto is the son of the sun.
sun, as in giant hydrogen and helium, star in Japanese is Taiyo, and sun as in like male progeny is Musuko. So while it's a cool thing in English, it's not in Japanese. Anyways, yes, Boruto is this generation's son. She is also the daughter of the original son, Naruto, whose chakra burned orange and brilliance blinded those who observed it, like Kari. And if we're going with the idea of Himawari being the flower that follows the sun, well, that could be a testament to her loyalty to Boruto. It could just as easily be a testament to her getting Naruto's powers. As we are all well aware, in Chapter 8 of Boruto, Jura stumbled upon Himawari. But not just because Himawari was in the middle of the street, no, because Jura believed he was following Naruto's chakra signature, because Jura picked up on the chakra of a tailed beast, and he figured the only person who would have the chakra of a tailed beast would be Naruto. But no, led him to Himawari, which has given people like me the validation that I've been looking for years, as I've been screaming from the rooftops that she's going to be a Jinchuriki, and a uniquely powerful one at that. But if we look a little deeper into the sunflower symbology and how sunflowers are gifted in Japan, one of the biggest things that sunflowers are said to represent in Japan is longevity. And thus, in Japan, you give somebody sunflowers if you A, adore them, and B, want them to have a long life. And while Naruto is still technically around and kicking in the Daikokuten, there is somebody in the Uzumaki household who isn't alive and well. And that somebody is Kurama. See, because as it currently stands right now, in Chapter 8, Jura said that he sensed Bijou chakra from the person that he thought was Naruto that eventually ended up being Himawari. Now, Bijou just means tailed beast. Kyubi means Kurama. But it'd be kind of weird if Jura knew what Kurama's chakra felt like, because Jura, so far as we know, has never interfaced with Kurama, or technically any other tailed beast. And thus the thing that pulled Jura to Himawari was the similarity in their own chakra signature. As the line that Jura says is that I sense Bijou chakra, and as the manifestation of a Bijou myself, I know what that feels like. Now sure, you can make the possible argument that Jura is Jigen and therefore Jura should know what Kurama's chakra feels like, but Hidari is Sasuke, and if Hidari has any kind of sensing ability even comparable to that of Jura, Hidari should have sensed Sarada's chakra in Konoha. And while it's been established that the Shinju have some of the feelings and the abilities of the people they bit to turn into Shinju, to assume that they have all of the knowledge is kind of a stretch when we see Hidari walking around asking bookstores if they're Naruto Uzumaki, and Jura's committed basically every single time he's not been kicking Kawaki's ass to reading books to gain information about the world he doesn't understand. And if we can assume that if Jura was made from Jigen somehow, Jigen, who was alive for 2,000 years, should probably have a bit more information than Jura has. And thus we can interpret Jura ending up at Himawari one of two ways. Either Jura does know what Kurama's chakra feels like, possibly through his connection with Jigen, and that's what brought him to Himawari, and thus Himawari is a Jinchuriki of Kurama somehow, or Himawari just has tailed beast chakra, which could mean she's the Jinchuriki of a different tailed beast not named Kurama, or she's a Jinchuriki of all of them. But it's important to note that Naruto was his sunniest during the 4th Great Shinobi World War, after which, notably, the sun symbol that was on his hand disappeared, possibly being a little wink and a little foreshadowing to the fact that Naruto was now no longer the son of his own universe. Now, obviously, I'm aware that the sun symbol disappeared from his hands because he pulled off the 6-pass Shibaku Tensei that was able to seal away Kaguya, but maybe it was symbolic. And it was also during the 4th Great Shinobi World War, when Naruto was his sunniest, that he was also briefly the Jinchuriki of all 9-tailed beasts. And thus, if Himawari was truly the flower that followed the sun, in reference to Naruto's power, wouldn't it make sense that she followed after Naruto's powers when he was the sunniest? And therefore the reason that Jura was able to identify what Bijou chakra felt like in Himawari is because Himawari's powers are eerily similar to that of Jura's, the power of the 9-tailed beasts put together, the 10 tails, which is why Daemon was interested in her and not Naruto. See, because Daemon met Naruto while he was still the Jinchuriki of Kurama, and yet Daemon expressed a special interest in Himawari, not Naruto, implying that not only are their powers different, but also that Himawari's is possibly greater, which just makes sense in the grand storytelling scheme of a next generation. Himawari, while a woman, which means in Kishimoto's universe she has to be at least a little strong or a big punchy healer, being stronger than Naruto would make sense. She's the next generation. Gohan was supposed to surpass Goku. And where this all ties into longevity is that Himawari might be able to use his connection to all 9-tailed beasts to bring Kurama back to life, as if Himawari was born with a little bit of chakra from all nine-tailed beasts, making her a pseudo 10-tailed Jinchuriki of sorts, and Himawari still holds on to a section of Kurama's chakra, and that section will serve as the foundation for Kurama to live a long life, and that long life will be given to him by the sunflower herself, Himawari. And thus, in a way that Clytie was never able to, Himawari will be able to express her love for the suns in her life by standing beside Boruto in his time of need and bringing Kurama back for Naruto. Because not for Naruto. Because while I believe that Himawari could operate as the foundation for the revival of Kurama, I don't believe anything as crazy as the fact that she's going to be able to split off that part of Kurama from her and give it back to her father. In fact, I believe that Naruto, just knowing that Kurama is alive and well within Himawari, his daughter, and is protecting her when he can't, would be more than Naruto could ever hope for. And the closing of Kurama and Himawari's story, when it opened with Himawari knocking both Naruto and Kurama out on the day of his inauguration, ending in Himawari and Kurama working together to once again protect the world, is a fantastic full circle moment for that story. And more than anything, it's exactly what Naruto would want. And thus Himawari would live up to the truest representation of the sunflower, as sunflowers are supposed to represent happiness. But I'm curious to hear what you guys think. What do you think all the symbolic ties between Himawari and sunflowers could really mean for her future, or do you believe it doesn't mean anything at all? Tell me in the comments below, and while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. I'm gonna teach you guys as much science and history as I can. I don't care how much anime I gotta roll into it.